Gymnastics is called the most beautiful sport on earth. But for these four young women, the mat they loved became the last place they ever competed. And the most terrifying part? Every single moment was caught on camera. Gymnastics had always been a sport that asked everything from the people who loved it. It asked for early mornings before the sun came up, for hands wrapped in tape over old blisters, for childhood spent in gyms while other kids played outside. For Jennifer Ray, none of that ever felt like sacrifice. It felt like purpose. She had grown up in a small town in rural Ohio, the youngest of three sisters, and had first touched a gymnastics bar at the age of 5. From that very first day, her coach pulled her mother aside and said quietly that she had never seen a child move like that. But Jennifer was fearless in a way that could not be taught. She did not approach difficult skills with caution. She ran at them. By the time she was 19, she had won 4 national titles and had been named to the United States Olympic training squad. The year was 2004. The Athens Olympics were 6 weeks away. The training facility in Texas was loud and bright and filled with the chalk dust and the sharp smell of rubber mats that Jennifer had loved since childhood. She was 20 years old, standing at the peak of everything she had ever worked for. On the morning of July 9th, Jennifer approached the vault runway for what her coaches had scheduled as her final full-power practice run before the team departed for Greece. She had performed this vault cleanly over 2,000 times in her career. Her approach was fast and perfectly straight. She hit the springboard exactly right. But in the half second that followed, something went wrong that nobody in that gym could fully explain. Her hands slipped on the vaulting table. Her body twisted at an angle it was never meant to reach. She came down headfirst onto the mat with a force that the entire gym heard. The room went completely silent. Jennifer Ray did not get up. She was taken by ambulance to a hospital in Houston, where doctors confirmed a catastrophic injury to her brainstem. She passed away quietly the following morning, with her mother holding her hand. She was 20 years old. She never saw Athens. The chalk dust had barely settled over Jennifer Ray's story when another young life was taken by the sport that had promised her everything. Khloe Bisay had grown up in Lyon, France, in a tiny apartment above a bakery, and had discovered gymnastics at the age of 6 when her school took a field trip to a local club. She never left. By the time she was 17, Khloe was the junior national champion of France and the most talked about young gymnast in all of Europe. Coaches described her as once in a generation. She had a beam routine so controlled and so precise that judges would hold their breath watching her perform it. On the evening of March the 14th, 2001, Khloe was competing in the European Junior Championships in Vienna, Austria. The arena held 4,000 people, and every seat was filled. The beam stood 4 feet off the ground under lights so bright they turned the apparatus silver. Khloe had performed her routine perfectly in warm-ups just 40 minutes earlier. When her name was called, she walked to the beam with the calm expression of someone who had done this 1,000 times because she had. She mounted cleanly. The first pass was flawless. The second pass drew a gasp of admiration from the crowd. Then, on the final tumbling combination, her foot placement shifted by less than 2 inches. She fell sideways off the beam. The fall itself was only 4 feet, but the way her head struck the edge of the apparatus before her body hit the mat below sent a sound through that arena that none of the 4,000 people present ever forgot. Khloe Bisay was 17 years old. She was airlifted to a hospital in Vienna and placed on life support. Her family flew through the night to reach her. 3 days later, surrounded by the people who loved her most, Khloe passed away. The European Junior Championships were suspended immediately. The gymnastics world went into mourning for a girl who had only just begun. Across 3 more time zones and 1 ocean, a third young woman was already deep into the training that would one day cost her everything. Park Soo-yeon had been born in Seoul, South Korea, the daughter of a former national team gymnast who had trained her daughter from the moment she could stand. Suan was 15 years old and already the most decorated junior gymnast in South Korean history. Her floor routine was so joyful and so explosive that crowds leapt to their feet every single time she performed it. At the Asian Junior Championships in 2004, competing in front of her home crowd in Seoul, Suan launched into a double twisting layout that she had trained for 8 months. On the landing, her left foot caught the edge of the mat. The rotation carried her forward at full speed with nothing to stop it. She struck the floor with the full force of her body weight, concentrated at the base of her skull. The arena of 6,000 people fell absolutely silent. Suan did not move. She was 15 years old. She was taken by ambulance to a hospital 3 miles from the arena where she had just been competing. She never regained consciousness. Park Soo-yeon passed away 2 days later. South Korea declared a national day of mourning for its brightest young athlete. By the time the gymnastics world had buried Jennifer Ray, Khloe Bisay, and Park Soo-yeon, the pressure for change had become impossible to ignore. Governing bodies held emergency meetings. Equipment manufacturers were called in for questioning, and coaches were asked to review every high-difficulty skill in every national program. But for one more young woman, every one of those conversations came 6 months too late. Maya Thornton had grown up in Birmingham, England, in a house where gymnastics was everything. Her bedroom walls were covered with posters of Olympic champions. She had trained 6 days a week since the age of 7 and had sacrificed more than most adults ever would before she turned 18. By 19, Maya was the British national champion and the most likely British gymnast to medal at the upcoming London Olympics. On a cold Saturday morning in February 2009, Maya was competing in a national qualifier in Manchester. The venue was packed with scouts, coaches, and fans who had come specifically to watch her. She was performing on the uneven bars, a discipline in which she had never once fallen in competition. Her routine was one of the most difficult in the world. On the release move in the center of her routine, the move she had performed cleanly for 2 full years, Maya's grip failed on the high bar. She flew backward through the air with no control and no time to adjust. She struck the edge of the low bar with the back of her neck at full speed before hitting the mat below. Maya Thornton was 19 years old. The arena went so quiet that people outside the building later said they knew something terrible had happened before anyone came to tell them. Maya was taken to hospital by emergency services. She passed away that evening. She had been 6 months away from competing at a home Olympics in front of her entire country. In the weeks that followed Maya's death, international gymnastics finally introduced the sweeping safety reforms that advocates had been demanding for years. Release moves on uneven bars were subjected to new approval criteria. Mat thickness around all apparatus was increased. Independent safety officers were placed at every sanctioned competition worldwide. The sport that had taken 4 young lives inside of a decade looked at itself and finally decided that enough was enough. Jennifer Ray never saw Athens. Khloe Bisay never stood on a European podium. Park Soo-yeon never heard her home crowd cheer her name at the Olympics she had spent her whole life preparing for. Maya Thornton never felt the floor of a London arena beneath her feet in the moment that had kept her going through every hard morning and every painful year. 4 girls, 4 countries, 4 sports careers that ended before they had the chance to become the stories they were always meant to be. But the sport they gave their lives to did not stay the same after they left it. Every mat that was made thicker, every rule that was written to protect the next generation, every young gymnast who trained today in a safer gym because of what happened to these 4. That is the legacy Jennifer, Khloe, Soo-yeon, and Maya left behind. Gymnastics is still the most beautiful sport in the world. But beauty built on broken bodies and stolen futures is not beauty at all. It is a debt. And the only way to repay it is to make sure that the next young girl who steps onto that mat for the first time gets the chance to step off it again. 4 mats, 4 final moments, Meet 4 young women who walked into the sport they loved and never walked back out. Jennifer Ray was 20 years old. Khloe Bisay was 17. Park Soo-yeon was 15. Maya Thornton was 19. Between them, they had given more than 60 combined years of their lives to gymnastics before gymnastics took everything back. Their deaths were not accidents waiting to happen. They were warnings that the sport ignored for too long. And the most haunting part of every single story is not the fall itself. It is the moment just before it. The moment where everything still looked perfect. Where the crowd was still smiling. Where the cameras were still rolling. Where each of these 4 girls was still exactly who she had always been. One heartbeat away from the rest of her life. If their stories made you feel something tonight, good. Find that feeling has a name. It is called the truth.